Northwest Now is supported, in part, by viewers like you. Thank you.
Did you know that a dozen species of salmon and steelhead native to the rivers of Puget Sound are listed under the Endangered Species Act? The barriers to their survival are many, from water quality to the loss of habitat to actual physical barriers that keep fish from completing their complex life cycles. But barriers are slowly being broken. And on the Hood Canal, the barrier to the area's salmon and steelhead runs isn't being broken, but modified. As Northwest Now's Steve Kiggins tells us, a group called Long Live the Kings is one of the stakeholders in an experiment to see if a large structure called a fillet can help steelhead and salmon survive their journey past the Hood Canal Bridge.
On a rainy and muggy July morning along Hood Canal, it seems Mother Nature forgot to pack the summer sun. A little rain never slowed down the logging industry, nor can a little drizzle delay conservationists working to save salmon runs along the Hood Canal rivers.
It's really our responsibility to help restore balance as best we can.
Biologist Joy Waltermeyer works for Long Live the Kings at the Lillywop Field Station. Tucked away from Highway 101 along Lillywop Creek sits Long Live the Kings Conservation Fish Hatchery. This is where 28 giant tanks raise naturally fertilized salmon eggs taken from Hood Canal local rivers.
In the Duckabush and the Dewato rivers, the populations were so depleted that close to 60 to 80% of the juveniles that we caught the year after were either progeny from one or two of the adults that we released.
After spending 2 to 4 years at the hatchery, Long Live the Kings releases hundreds of steelhead back into their native spawning rivers where they begin their journey out of Puget Sound. But salmon runs returning from the ocean continue to decline year after year.
Around the state, the seals, they have very little pressure. So, these predators don't have the predation of the whales that we used to see, the orca whales. And so the numbers are so out of whack, and our food chain is completely suffering. And unfortunately, steelhead are migrating out at a time when there's very other salmon, and so they're small numbers, they're just getting hit so hard.
It's NOAA's mission to protect and recover listed species. Steelhead are listed, and it's been my job for 17 years to try to figure out why those populations aren't doing well.
NOAA research fisheries biologist Megan Moore says steelhead were listed as threatened back in 2007. The fish have been tracked by scientists ever since 2006. And every year after, researchers recorded steelhead mortality rates that were steadily on the rise. So scientists decided to take their research even deeper, skin deep.
We use acoustic transmitters, and we implant these tiny acoustic tags in the body cavity of the fish, anesthetize them, do the little surgery. We do the incision, put the tag in the fish, and then use sutures to close up the wound, and then they recover in like a minute, and then we let them kind of acclimate overnight, and then we release them back into the river.
By surgically inserting acoustic telemetry tags into the steelhead, researchers could track their movements as they swim north through Hood Canal.
And I can show you, actually have one of the receivers. This is what the receivers look like. They're these little units. And they're deployed on the bottom of the ocean around the Hood Canal Bridge. And we use those to triangulate the position of individual fish.
And while the transmitters were good at tracking steelhead movement, they were also good tracking where their movement suddenly halted. More often at the Hood Canal, where the floating bridge connects Kitsap and Jefferson counties.
Really didn't know what would be causing that at the time. We didn't know if it was going to be light coming off the bridge, if it was sound generated by the bridge, if it was the structure itself. if it was something about the hydraulics, the way that the bridge affects water movement and water quality.
If we're losing up to half the fish that encounter the bridge when they're young steelhead migrating out, then all of that effort to try to increase the populations of steelhead in the Hood Canal is, it's not for naught, but we're definitely, limiting our success by allowing them to then perish at the Hood Canal Bridge.
In 2020, Long Live the Kings prepared a report gathering data from government, tribal, and nonprofit organizations that detailed the bridge's potential impact on the environment and salmon runs. WashDOT estimates on average 18,000 vehicles cross the floating bridge every day. The pontoons that keep the bridge afloat sink about 15 feet under the surface. But juvenile steelhead typically only travel in the top meter of water, making those pontoons act like a barrier. Radio transmitters attached to the fish tell researchers nearly 50% of the steelhead heading towards the ocean don't survive past the floating bridge. The study suggests seals are likely taking advantage of stranded, migrating steelhead. Those pontoons also jut outward from the bridge for structure support, and researchers believe the infrastructure confuses steelhead, sending them into a holding pattern back and forth along the span where they make for easy prey.
When they get delayed, that messes with their anti-predator behavior, so they're really not able to evade predators like they normally would be, and so they're spending all this time at the bridge vulnerable to predation.
That's why Long Live the Kings and partners ponied up more than $1.5 million to design, construct, and transport this giant yellow device and then attach it to the side of the Hood Canal Bridge. It's called a fillet. It aims to cut the corners and hopefully push more steelhead towards safe passage out of Hood Canal.
But if we can get them around the bridge and we can try these different techniques to help them get around the bridge, that this is a solution that can work.
Long Live the King says so far, anecdotally, the fillet looks to be promising, but more rigorous study over new data must be complete to determine its true effectiveness. The team is also looking over new visual acoustics data, seen here, showing how seals have used the bridge's pontoons to corral and attack steelhead.
And you can see how the seal uses the bridge, the structure, to kind of herd this school of fish into the corner. And then it'll come up through the middle of the school of fish and feed on it.
Other obstacles posed by the bridge identified in the study also impact migrating steelhead, but it's the fillet that the Kings believe could allow the largest number of steelhead to pass successfully beyond predation and onto adulthood. Full analysis of the fillet's impact might not be fully understood until the summer of 2024. But for those working on this project, it's a sense of hope that steelhead now have a fighting chance.
I grew up going to Girl Scouts camp and learning how to sail on Hood Canal, and it's a really special place and near to dear to people's heart. And so we all want to see the salmon and the steelhead survive in this kind of habitat, and we want to see Hood Canal thriving, and see, be able to see orcas coming in, and be able to have the kind of ecosystem that we all remember and love.
So, considering all that's at stake, from the steelhead themselves to the orca that rely on their nutrition and the salmon's cultural significance to our region and beyond, Long Live the Kings believe saving salmon is how we save ourselves.
We can make it better. It's not doomsday. We have technology, we have really smart people and passionate public, and we're Washingtonians. This salmon and steelhead are synonymous with our existence, and it truly is our responsibility to not give up.
On the Hood Canal, Steve Kiggins, Northwest Now.
Long Live the Kings is also looking into a plan to modify the operation of the locks and the Lake Washington Ship Canal, barriers with long histories of keeping native fish from thriving in King County.